Welcome to Bread and Butter, everybody, the Hearthstone podcast where... Nope. Tito, do you want to take the intro today?
Sure, I can do that.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bread and Butter. We're serving up the basics, the average Hearthstone... I guess I can't talk either. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bread and Butter, serving up the basics the average Hearthstone player needs for Hearthstone improvement. Today we have a very special guest with us, Doc. Why don't we introduce him right away? WickedGood, thank you for coming on. How are you this evening?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh, we definitely appreciate it. We've already had your co-host Edelon, who talk about building decks, and that was exciting. And people might think that since you're here, we have you on to talk about priests, but that's not actually the case. But before we get into the subject of today's podcast, why don't you tell us, how are you today, Steve?
I'm good. I had a, unexpected 3-day weekend. So, today feels like Sunday, and then tomorrow is actually another day that I get to, sleep in. So got God of War Ragnarok. So that's been, that's been a good way to fill the time. And, yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Is the voice actor for that still the same one from before, Teal'c from Stargate?
I think so. I think they had to postpone it for like a year because he lost his voice for a while. So I think it is the same voice actor. They didn't pull like a Witcher Netflix series or anything like that. So
We still get one more season with Cavill, though.
But it's very good. I mean, the grunting definitely sounds the same. So I will say that much. So that's really all that matters.
Now, is that a style of game you typically play, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I have the PlayStation for. Like the kind of cinematic, wander around and hit things kinds of games. Like I just played through Ghost of Tsushima. I've been playing through Spider-Man Miles Morales. Like, that sort of guy. I don't go for the Dark Souls types things, but that type of, blockbuster cinematic type game. Horizon Forbidden West is another one that I spent a lot of time with. So I like those kinds of open world-ish games that tell you where you're going. I'm not a big Breath of the Wild fan because I just get lost without any navigation, but the ones that actually tell you where you're going and what you need to do, and here's all the 16,000 things that you could do, go do one of them, like that's my jam.
So where did you fall on Skyrim? That's kind of like between those, right?
It's fine. I liked it more on the Switch when I was able to play it on the train, and I had nothing else to do. But it's generally like it's a lot of wandering around that is, when I'm could be doing other things. It's kind of I booted. I actually reinstalled it because it's on Game Pass now. So I started playing it again, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. And I played for a few days and kind of forgot about it. So, that kind of tells you.
Yeah, I used to play Skyrim too, and then I took an arrow to the knee. How about you, Doc? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm officially moved in, and I finally got internet, which is nice, and we're actually getting faster internet than what we're paying for, which is another big bonus. Works really crazy. For everyone who doesn't know by now, I am a baker, and we need to make a bunch of rolls for Thanksgiving. I think the number we're shooting for is like 1,800 dozen. And we still need to make about 800 dozen rolls, and we couldn't make rolls today because we were out of dough freeze, and we have to freeze all of our rolls for Thanksgiving. So we didn't get to make any rolls today, so it's just going to be very, very busy for me. And then next weekend, I'm going to DreamHack Atlanta. So when this episode airs, it's going to be this weekend. But, yeah.
So are they going to have a Hearthstone tournament there, or?
No, unfortunately. But I'm still going to go and meet up with all the Swagoi people, so that'll be really nice. Edelweiss is really sad because she has a wedding she has to go to. That's the same weekend, but she wanted to go to DreamHack as well. When I went to DreamHack Denver, there was a Hearthstone Grand Prix there, and I was really hoping that there would be one at Atlanta. But unfortunately, that's an L I'm going to have to take.
Yeah, maybe we'll find out when they actually tell us what the Hearthstone competitive system is going to be for next year. If there will be any lands with any dream hacks that maybe people could go to, that would be nice.
That would be awesome. Tito, what have you been up to?
Been working. Work's been very busy. We're coming up on a crazy deadline, which hopefully once we get to the end of the month, things will kind of even out. But It's been keeping me busy. Went to IKEA today, kind of as a surprise. Was looking to expand my work area now that I have 3 monitors and I have a laptop and there's just not enough room on my desk. So I ended up going to IKEA today to buy a new desk. So doesn't sound very exciting, but I've had the same desk for about 20 years now, which is also from IKEA. So I'm looking forward to getting a new one. Aside from that, we've had COVID running through my house. My wife got it first as a parting gift from her last job. Then my son ended up with it a few days later, so that was kind of disappointing. I am still the Delta Dodger, so I am happy about that. But it's been rough. The boy is having a little problems with the taste and the smell, which is not something you want to hear. But we'll see how it goes. But anyway, Doc, he may not be able to taste food, but I think I'm starting to get a little hungry. So how about some appetizers?
Yeah.
No, Homer, don't fill up on bread!
Okay, so WickedGood, what have you been playing Hearthstone-wise recently?
Well, I went to Legend with Quest Priest because I am a notorious, I don't know what the word is you want to do, priest main. I mean, I don't only play priest. There are some mains, like there's like Zed a lot or you know, who only plays priest, or like Sidisi who basically only plays hunter. I do play everything. I just, when I have the choice and when priest is playable, I'd rather play priest. So I ended up just like taking the quest priest that I was running before the Knights of the Frozen Throne stuff came in, just like went through, well, what's new? Okay, well, Sunwell seems like it's okay sometimes, like just to get you either a card that you can play to finish a part of the quest, or you can generate a card that will finish a part of the quest. And then I was just kind of going through all the Knights of the Frozen Throne cards and like, well, there's not much that's there. It's a lot of big priest cards, but Spirit Lash was in that set, and so I took out Condemn for that. Spirit Lash is really good still. That's a really good card. Spirit Lash Zarella is almost always a full clear. And even just like having that available to just get a heal regardless. I mean, Condemn is like a card that you run, but I always kind of hated it in the list, but you kind of needed it just because, like, you need some sort of a small AoE. Like, if you don't have that against, like, an aggro druid or a warlock, you can't deal with a bunch of, like, early minions. You just die. But this both deals with that and heals you, which is nice. And also, you know, combos with Zarella and other things. And it's a shadow spell, not a holy spell, so it's less that's getting in the way of drawing the quest reward at the end of the game, too. So it makes the spirit guides more consistent. You know, I mean, you're adding the Sunwell in, which is another holy spell, so it kind of, you know, it kind of evens out. But I ended up with some, like, I don't even remember what the win rate was, but it was some ridiculous win rate, and just went through. I had 11x this month, so I just went through. I think it was like 14-3 or something like that, or 14-6, something like that, and just went straight up to Legend the first week of the month. Almost did it all on stream, and then just got tired at the end.
Yeah.
You know, playing Priest for that long will do that. But yeah, I mean, and I've been playing some other stuff since. Like, I've been playing some Curse Imp Warlock occasionally. I played some Naga Priest today, just because I'm trying to repair my rank after my stream last night, where we raised money for Boston Children's Hospital, and the final milestone was letting Sidisi pick all my decks, because he and I are basically the odd couple of Hearthstone, where he only plays Hunter and I only play Priest. So I let him choose my decks, and some of them were fine. Beast Hunter's actually pretty good. And some of them, like Boar Hunter and what was the other one that was dumb? Oh, Prestor Hunter. Those didn't go so well. So those kind of, you know, I needed to do a little bit of repair on my rank, you know, today to kind of make up for that. I'm not playing a ton just because I'm kind of burned out on the meta right now, but I would like to keep myself like 11x adjacent at least, so I can, you know, go back next month when the new set comes out and then be able to kind of hit the ground running.
Well, with the Boar Hunter, were you able to at least draw the Sword of Truth once?
I was not. That did not happen. You need a lot more card draw than I think that deck has in order to make that happen. I did make some 3/3 boars. That was fun. But yeah, I didn't get, you kind of, I guess you need like a big turn with like a bunch of boars and like Devouring Swarm and whatever to make it happen, and it just like never came together for me.
I know you say you're being a little burnt out, but how have you enjoyed the influx of cards from the Frozen Throne set?
It's kind of inconsequential, really. I mean, you know, they're spread like most of the heroes just aren't playable, which is kind of funny. It's an interesting, you know, lesson in like how far the game has come, right? That like most of the cards that were printed in that set were like broken when they were printed.
Yep.
And they're just like not good enough, like at all. Like Deathstalker Rexar, I think, is the only hero that's even like borderline playable. You have like Spreading Plague and Defile. Like Spirit Lash is fine. Like I found a use for that, but like there's Spreading Plague and Defile and is that it? It might be it. Like there's not a whole lot else that's really like
The Berserker.
usable. Oh yeah, Animated Berserker is making Rage Warrior playable. But like, I mean, it was balanced for a different time, and those cards are just like there were that was also for like when we had the classic set, not the core set, so like the entire like quality of cards was less even, and the power level in general was lower because you had all this jank in the classic set that you were balancing around instead of like having a higher power level in the core set that we have now. So it was just kind of like I was expecting it to make a bigger difference, and it's really kind of, it's funny how little of a difference it made. It's fun to get those in there and try, and you know, especially like the first day when people were trying things. Like I spent my day playing, you know, trying to make like Uther OTK Paladin work again. Like that was like day one.
I did lose to that deck. They were able to get the Jailer down with the Ragnaros Lightlord, and I was not able to recover.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you don't think about when you start coming up with that idea is that you have to play the Jailer after playing Uther and then live for 4 more turns, because there's no way to refresh your hero power in Standard right now. Like that was doing things with like the Auction Master Beardo or whatever the hell his name was, that would refresh your hero power, you know, whenever you played a spell or something. I don't remember what the hell it was. But yeah, you can't do that now. So it's just like you're just like, okay, I'm gonna play the Jailer and then I'm gonna hope that these all stick for 4 turns. And like you probably don't need that to win.
And it's the same thing kind of when we had the core rotation. The core rotation, they really hyped up, oh, we got some spicy cards. But with the exception of like Bran, most of those cards never really saw that much new play. We got Lyra back, never saw the light of day.
You have Earthen Scales and Tess Greymane. Like those 2 probably made up for everything else that they printed. So like Earthen Scales alone makes up for everything else that they brought back that didn't land. So
that's fair. I'm okay with that card being deleted forever.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Doc? What have you been up to?
I've been playing a lot of BGs because I got my feelings hurt in our monthly competition. So it's been playing BGs. I'm up to like 5,530 MMR. Have had some very wacky games. I had a game where I was Queen Wogtaggle and I got the Menagerie quest, and I couldn't go for spicy because I tied like twice early on, but I literally didn't lose a turn until like turn 17. It was a 20 turn BG lobby, and for like 3 rounds in a row, it was like a 7.5% to win, and I just couldn't find it. So I conceded because I didn't want to go into a 21 turn game. I've played 4 games of Naga Priest because Hat said to play it, and so I'm trying to learn it. And I was never good at Inner Fire Priest, and this is just almost new Inner Fire Priest. I had 1 game where I won, but it felt like I was losing until I won the game. Because the rogue was just able to clear every single minion I put down, no matter how big I made it. But then the 1 minion that stuck, that's all I needed, and it just wasn't fair. But I literally felt like I was losing until the turn I won the game.
I mean,
so I think it's weird.
That's the experience with that deck. Like that's the thing. Like that I know that the Vicious Syndicate podcast is extremely analytical, and that's their thing. I think when I've told Hat this too, because we've had this discussion. I played plenty of of Wake Priest, and I have decent results with it. But like the games that you lose feel so bad that and it takes a while to learn how to play the deck. So it's like if you can't get past that, it's so hard to stay with the deck. Like I was playing that today and I lost like 5 out of my first 6 and then I went on a 5-game win streak. But it's like I had to stay with it and say, no, I'm actually like not terrible. I'm just I mean there's some things that I knew I was doing wrong. And because I was tilted. And then it's just like I need to take a break and just come back to it. But like it's like there are just some cards that just completely blow you out, or you run into a mage and then you just sit there and hold your head in your hands for 20 minutes. And those games are terrible, but you do have a puncher's chance in a lot of games. But it also just like it's almost like Garrett Rogue back like this time last year, where you just kind of like need to know what those things are and you need to know how to set them up, and it takes a lot of losing and a lot more than a lot of other decks. Like there are a lot of decks that are difficult, but if it clicks with you, then you just kind of get it. And Naga Priest, it takes you a while to like learn all the different ways that you lose before you start winning, and it's hard for a lot of people to get past that.
It's funny you say that because I started playing it as well. I had climbed up to D5 mostly with Enrage Warrior, which was a lot of fun, and then I kind of sputtered out there. So then I made the switch to Mech Paladin for a reason, and I did really well with that. The first night I played with it, I went like 8-3, and then the next day I went like 2-7. So I will say I did have a very fun game where I played against a Dead Man's Hand Warrior, and I managed to generate 3 Steam Cleaners. So I won that game. It was fun. But outside of that, I started playing. I figured I'm at the ranked floor. I'm D5, ranked floor. Let's start working on Naga Priest because I know it's going to take some time. And every day I play it, I have the same thing. I start off like 0-3, 0-4, just like you were saying. And then I come back. And on streams, I've ended the night like 500, but it's taken a bunch of losses to then kind of get comfortable and then do it. I'm still right around D5, D4, and I'm just kind of sputtering with it. But I know it's a good deck, so I'm like, might as well try to learn how to play with it. But I'm kind of at the point now where like, well, is this the deck I'm going to be able to climb with? I'm not sure. But we're trying. And to go into why Doc was saying he was a little sad about our monthly bet. So for those that don't know, me and Doc have had a monthly bet now for about 4 or 5 months, where we go with whoever finishes with the higher MMR in Battlegrounds wins 5 packs or whatever. And we've augmented,
like 5 to 10.
Yeah, we've augmented a little bit. I think I got you back before Runestones. I got you a portrait or not a hero. I think
it was the Vosh bundle.
Okay, which I would still do if Blizzard would still let me buy these things with Runestones. I don't care. Let me buy and gift things. You cannot buy a package and gift it if you buy it with Runestones, and that is frustrating. But Doc beat me for a couple months because I was more focused on Standard. He got much higher than me in the MMR. I said, you know what? I got to Legend early last month, and I said I'm going to catch up. So I turned it on. And on the very last night I was on stream and I just finished up, I said, you know what? I'm going to play a couple Battlegrounds. And I played 2 games and I ended up beating Doc by 1 MMR point.
Yeah.
So I think that was a great way to end it. But, I mean, all this talk about beating you, Doc, is getting me even hungrier. So why don't we just go into our interview now and talk to Steve a little bit? Because I messed up that transition. Because I'm
You're good.
I'm new to
You're
podcasting,
good.
clearly.
So Steve, what is your history with video games and Hearthstone?
Well, I mean, video games I started when I was like 3 or 4 years old, and my parents bought an Atari 2600 because I am in fact old as the hills.
I'm that old too. So what were your first games though?
E.T.
Nice.
Let's go.
Yep, that was the game they got with the 2600. Yep, and I spent a lot of time climbing out of pits thinking that I was not quite good enough. Like that was my original get good moment, was like playing ET, and like if I just get better at this game, then I'm going to get to the fun part. And turns out there is no fun part. It's just that's all there is.
I had that same experience with the Indiana Jones game. There was one point you had to try to get a parachute and land on a tree, and it just never worked out.
Yeah, but the difference is that they didn't bury like hundreds of thousands of Indiana Jones cartridges in a landfill because it was so bad. But yeah, so I had that. I had a Commodore 64 growing up. I got into the NES late because my parents didn't really want to, like, they saw it as a money sink basically, and so like they got me like the NES when I was like 11 because I was sick with chicken pox. And like seemed to have taken a turn for the worse, and then my dad came home with the NES, and I had a miraculous recovery. But I didn't really. I mean, that was the last console I got until in college when my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and I went in on an N64. So but I had a PC for for school and whatever, and I played Doom when that came out. Some of the like Day of the Tentacle was around when I was in high school, and then the first Blizzard game that I got was Diablo 1, when I was, I guess, 17. I remember driving to Egghead Software with my paycheck from ShopRite, the supermarket in New Jersey that I worked at, and going to buy it and coming home with it. And that was like my entire senior year of high school was just that. And then Diablo 2 came out when I was in college too, and that was like my wife and I both played that like a ton. Because we were dating at the time, and we were both playing like a lot of Diablo 2. So like Diablo's always kind of been my first Blizzard game, but I ended up playing a lot of Magic in high school because I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I didn't have access to a lot of video games. So I played Magic. I was able to convince my parents. Like my mom and I went to the comic book store, and it's like, oh, here's this $12 deck of cards, and oh yeah, that's got to be cheaper than a Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
So they definitely misplayed on that one, but it was so that was like in high school, and then like my freshman year of college, I played Magic. So this was like the revised era. I started like my first expansion was the Dark, and the last one that I played was Stronghold. I got to a top 16 in a Stronghold pre-release in Boston, and the difficulty of that was then topped by having to get a cab out of Boston at 2:30 in the morning because they roll up the sidewalks at midnight. So like all like we took the commuter rail in and then had to find our own way home, and it was whatever I won out of that went into the cab ride to get back to the dorm. But yeah, I mean that's it. And then I picked up Hearthstone. I played it in beta briefly, but I didn't really get into it at the time. I kind of thought it was Magic for Babies effectively, and it wasn't until it came out on the phone that I was able to give it like a legit shot, because like it was also like I had a Mac, like everything's janky when you're trying to play on a Mac, even though it's supported. So I was like, I didn't really want to be sitting in front of a computer to do it at the time. But then once I got it on the phone, then it kind of clicked, and I spent the time with it and went through everything, and then here we are. So I ended up playing around, starting really around Blackrock Mountain, and TGT, and then then ended up starting to do card reviews with Andrew Brown and the Happy Hearthstone in Ungoro. Started Off Curve, which is the podcast that I did before I was on Coin Concede. Shortly after that, did that for several years until Hat and Edel asked me to join the cast in the beginning of this year, and that's where I've been.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you've been the host for Coin Concede for a while, and you had Off Curve for a really long time, which is a solo podcast. What was the transition like from kind of doing your own thing to being part of a team?
It's mostly good. I will say that. And I've been on group podcasts before. Like I had a couple of tech podcasts on Relayed Out FM that I was a part of before this, and then those ended around at the 2017. Those ended, or beginning of 2018, I guess technically, and that's when I started streaming. Because I had that time built up. But I was kind of at that point, I was kind of that was a lot, and that kind of ended in a weird way. And like the thing is that when you're doing a solo podcast, like Off Curve was a show that I would just basically press record when I started driving somewhere and just kept talking until I got to where I was going. Which, as if anyone who knows me knows, I could talk about these things for indefinitely if you let me. Which the car wouldn't stop until I got somewhere, so that kind of did let me. But so like that was and that was something where I was very in control of my own schedule. I did it when I wanted to. If I needed to take a week off, I did. If I didn't feel like it, I wouldn't do an episode that week. It got harder when the pandemic started, just because I didn't have it. I had to kind of force myself to record at particular times. Like when I was going to the office every day, I just have like a commute. My commute was generally like from the train station was like 40 to 45 minutes. So that was a pretty decent chunk of time that I could just press record and go. Once the pandemic started, then it got a little bit more complicated. Like I had to I would have to do it when I'm going to pick up the groceries from the supermarket, and like I would get into the car and like, oh crap, I haven't recorded an episode, I haven't planned anything, but I need to record something because I'm not gonna be able to get in the car for another week, right? And like I tried doing it from the desk, but that just felt weird, like sitting here. Like it's one thing when I'm driving and I'm like focusing on the road and then like talking while I'm doing that. So everything when I'm just sitting here at the desk, like monologuing for half an hour, there's like a different vibe to it. So yeah, but I mean that was also like I had a lot of freedom there, and I didn't have to worry about scheduling or anything like that. And then had Adel asked me to join Quick Conceit, and it's like, well, I'm giving up some of my brand, which I'd worked for several years to build. But obviously Coin Conceit is I mean it's one of the preeminent podcasts it's probably second to the Angry Chicken, I would say. I mean modestly so, but I mean I think objectively it's we're one of the most popular Hearthstone podcasts next to the Angry Chicken.
I would say that the Angry Chicken is while it's probably more popular, is the casual casual Hearthstone, where you guys are probably, I would say, the number one podcast for people that take Hearthstone with a monicum of seriousness.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of the baby bear in the Hat Goldilocks trilogy of podcasts, where you have the Angry Chicken, which is more more oriented towards the casual player, and then you have the Vicious Syndicate podcast, which is towards the ladder grinder, and then we're kind of in the middle, where we're kind of like for the player who's taking the next step into serious competitive play, but isn't like top 500 legend already, right? Like someone who's like climbing the ladder, getting more serious about playing, trying to improve their game, but not necessarily like playing in Masters tours, which is what the Vicious Syndicate is kind of targeting.
So kind of like what we hope our listeners are.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say, Steve, the thing that I miss most about Off Curve, I love having you on the Coin Conceit, but I used to love your within 2 hours of a patch drop. It was the update of, hey, here's our initial thoughts. And I love that edition of it.
And that's the kind of thing you can do when you're not coordinating with two other people, right? Like I was able to do that, just like, okay, I'm just going to record that, I'm going to put it out. And I mean, I could do that on YouTube if I could figure out how to do YouTube, but I'm getting too old for that. But that's the kind of thing that I was able to just do. I was able to just like record, especially when I was working in the office, and I just drive home and like, okay, well, here's the patch notes, let's go. So there's a little bit less of that, coordinating with other people and, juggling schedules. But at the end of the day, first of all, I get to talk to two of my good friends every week for like 2-3 hours, and we have a lot of fun. So like, that's a bonus in and of itself. And also like, I don't have to do everything, right? Like I don't have to edit the show, or I mean, I usually, contribute by putting all the show notes together, but I don't have to like, edit everything and post everything and promote everything and come up with everything that we're going to talk about. And like, it's a group effort and there's people to bounce off of. And, so like, and it's, so that's really good too. And like, quite frankly, like, I did one of the things that I did on Off Curve was every set we would go through, which is kind of an extension of what we would do on the Happy Hearthstone until Andrew ended up, stepping back from that. And I took it over on Off Curve, was the card by card reviews. And I loved doing those, but boy, do I not miss doing those. Like, because it was so much more. Like you hear all these card reviews and like it's a lot of content, but it's like there's so much work that goes into that, both in just like going through and having an opinion on every single card, whether or not it's actually relevant to to construct it or not, and then just having the time to be able to record all that and then edit it, like 2-3.5 hour shows usually. And Matt at Arms was doing it with me for a while, and then he wasn't. He had some things come up in his life, and I was starting to have trouble finding somebody else to do it with, and then this offer came in. It's like, okay, now I don't even have to think about it. Like that's it was already kind of winding down with the feasibility of that. But it was felt that I felt like I had to keep doing, because like that was the thing that I did. So kind of getting permission to not do that was also, as much as I do miss it, I do miss having those shows and going through those in detail, but also it's just so much work that I'm kind of glad in retrospect.
And now there's 10% more cards to review.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I always like those episodes, but I also would skip them a lot, especially if I hadn't gotten to them. As soon as the set released, I no longer cared about speculation. I only wanted what's going on right here. So as a consumer, I'm always like, I want to listen to them, but then as soon as the set's out, I'm like, nah, forget it. I'll just get to the next episode, because there's a lot to listen to when I already know something about the cards. So that's a lot of work.
There was a lot of time pressure with those, like, and and the sets used to be a lot. I mean, they're doing better now, but like there are some times that we wouldn't get any of the card, like the last drop, until like the Monday before the set came out, and it's like, well, when the hell do we record it?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're just kind of like scrambling. So it's definitely it was a lot of work for it ended up being diminishing returns ultimately.
So, do you do Coin Concede? Do you have any aspirations of starting another project in the future, or are you kind of good with just Coin Concede?
I kick around the idea of a YouTube channel mainly because Twitter's imploding, and so like I do stream on my channel, and like I know that having a YouTube would help with stream discoverability, but I'm not really passionate about it, which is why I haven't done it.
And Doc just started up YouTube as well, and all it took for him was forgetting his Twitch password. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But so it's like I'm pretty stretched thin at this point. Like I've got a full-time job on top of this. I stream twice a week. And then we there's coaching that I do as part of Coin Concede as well, and then we have bonus episodes, and it's like I'm tired. It's like it's a lot, and I love what I do. I do still run the tournament stats at offcurve.com. That's whenever there's a Masters Tour or a I mean, when there are qualifiers, that's every weekend. That I mean, it's not a ton of time that I'm spending on it when it's just qualifiers, because I mean, I've got all the scripts kind of down to a science that I'm just running them, and it's like 15 minutes a day, but it's something I have to keep up with a lot. And then obviously when there's a Masters Tour, then I have to go through and I do a bunch of analysis there and tweet those out, as long as Twitter still exists. So like that's there's a fair amount. Like it's like I don't really like like this is when like Hat keeps getting asked every time a new game comes out if he's going to do another podcast, and he assures people he's not, and that's basically like where I'm at. Like it's like I'm very happy with what I'm doing, and if I was going to do more, it would probably be just streaming another night, but I don't think that's not something I really want to put on myself. Like I've definitely, as I'm getting older, I'm also kind of more aware of where my time goes, and like everything is an opportunity cost, so like whenever I'm saying yes to something, I'm saying no to something else ultimately. So I've been trying to keep my options open that way in case something were to come up, then I could maybe say yes to it. And that's what happened with Coin Concede, that I ultimately was able to find a way to say yes to it. But yeah, the more that I take on, the more other things that it closes off, which I don't even know what they're there, but I only have limited energy at the end of the day. I've got 3 kids. I like to see them once in a while, so.
That's why all my content creation happens from like 9 to 12. Otherwise my wife would probably get a little upset. But just for those that don't know, what is the Off Curve the site you were just talking about, like what specifically does it do? What's the quick elevator pitch for people that have never heard of this?
It's basically HS replay for tournament stats. So like I'll when there are Masters tours or qualifiers, I'll go collect. It's not down to the level of HS replay does because I don't get card by card play. I don't get like game in-game statistics, but I get, like matchups and stuff like that. So I just break it down with into charts and graphs of like what the distribution of decks are, what the distribution of lineups are, like what the matchups are, like which decks are performing well, which decks aren't performing well, what's getting banned a lot, and various and other statistics there. So it's a resource that a lot of tournament players use to help plan their lineups, and it is the only place that you can get Conquest stats, which Conquest, is a little bit different than Ladder, just in terms of the kinds of decks that get brought and like what you're trying to do with the decks you're bringing. So it's a little bit more relevant for Conquest. When we do have qualifiers, or we have Masters tours, that I'm able to update that.
It's why when you take a deck that you've seen in a tournament, you bring it to Ladder, it doesn't work as well. And that's we'll have a future episode about preparing for those kind of things, and we might hopefully have Steve back there in a few months when it's closer to relevance.
So Steve, you mentioned that you stream a couple nights a week. Last month, you were doing a charity stream or charity streams for Boston Children's Hospital. Do you want to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So last month was ADHD Awareness Month. I've been fairly open that I got diagnosed with ADHD a few years ago. My kids are all either ADHD or autistic or both in some cases, and we've spent a lot of time at the neurology department at Boston Children's when they were young, and then we still do to some extent, and they're like, they just do wonders there. Like, that place is just absolutely amazing. And I mean, like, we're not in there for any sort of a life-threatening condition. Like, obviously, neurological disorders are very serious, but like, we're not there for like a heart transplant or anything like that, but I know that they do wonderful work across the board. But the neurology department's been amazing to us, like fighting with the insurance companies, helping us with the schools, going through IEPs and everything else, and just kind of helping to make sure that like I got diagnosed after they got diagnosed, right? Because I never knew, and like, making sure that they are not having the struggles that I had growing up without knowing about any of this stuff. So, so every year, this time of year, I mean, the Extra Life game day is November 7th anyway, so it kind of lines up with ADHD Awareness Month, and I like to do a a fundraiser for them, and raised over $1,700 this year, and just really, really blown away by the level of support. It's just absolutely, it's beyond words, really, of what it means to be able to just kind of give that back to them for everything that they've done for me and my family, but also just for like a lot of sick kids who are just like sitting in the hospital and just like, scared, and at least like, able to give them some things to do to take their mind off it for a little while. Right. So it's a really great cause, and I'm really happy I'm able to give back that way.
Like, incredible. Sorry that I don't have words right now, but I was diagnosed with ADHD like as a kid, so thankfully, like, I didn't have. I mean, it was still a really difficult time, and like I had IEP and 504s and all that kind of stuff to help facilitate like me trying to learn at a more normal rate. But when I didn't know you had ADHD for a while, and then when I started listening to more Coin Conceit and everything, like, felt nice having someone who's a more prominent member of the community having something like that in common with.
And
but
on that note,
play
before you go into that, I just got diagnosed myself a few months ago, and I just started medication for the first. I'm 47. You're never too old to figure these things out and help. And since I started that, I started the podcast, I started streaming, I started doing YouTube content, and probably overextended for what I should be doing in the opposite direction. But If you think that you might have something, like, go see a doctor, talk to them, talk to your PCP, or primary care physician. You're never too old to figure these things out. So, I'm sorry, Doc. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So you play a class that at surface level doesn't seem like it's very conductive for someone with ADHD, just because we have attention issues and memory issues and stuff like that. What about priests like makes you like it so much?
So I think it was. I mean, it was actually the first class that I clicked with when I started playing. Like the first time that I holy novid with a Northshire cleric on board, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. All right. I think, and Hat and I have talked about this on the show too, because he also has ADHD, and he and I are like polar opposites in types of in terms of the types of decks that we're attracted to. Like I don't want to say I can't play aggro. I just played Hunter for 3 hours on my stream last night. I can play aggro. I'm fairly good at it when I do play it. I hate it, but I can play it. But the thing is that one of the things that happens with me is that I end up seeking novelty. So like, even though there are a lot of decisions that can be varied at the beginning of an aggro game plan, and I am not going to imply that aggro is easy to play, because it's not, or aggro is always the same thing, because like the number of decisions that you make at the beginning of the game are potentially there's a ton of them, and they can go in very different directions. But I find that like a lot of the games feel very samey to me, whereas Control feels like an escape room, right? Where you're going to get thrown into a situation and you don't know what it is and you don't know what it's going to be, but you know you've got some tools and you need to be able to find your way out of it. And that's what I like about it. I like feeling like I know when I have my tools, I know I can get out of this, but I don't know how, right? And then that's the challenge for me. And so it's a different puzzle to solve every game. Aggro can be that way too. It's just that for whatever reason, it just feels very, the kinds of puzzles feel very similar to me, and it gets boring. Like the first time I hit Legend was with Aggro Shaman, and it was like Pirate Warrior and Aggro Shaman, and I did it, but it was like, like I didn't enjoy it very much. But it's definitely just like different situations, and like sometimes you have decks where you're discovering cards, you're playing Thief Priest, and who the hell knows what's gonna happen. You're just gonna find your way out with this random pile of crap that you end up in your hand. But I like that. I like having a different challenge, and I think ultimately people are drawn to whatever makes them feel smart at the end of the day, right? Like that's kind of my philosophy about like why people get drawn to a play style. I think whatever makes them feel smart is what they enjoy, and Control makes me feel smart. Like getting out of an impossible situation makes me feel smart.
What would you say to noted priest hater Daniel Stormreed Sheldon, who thinks the class should be deleted from the game?
I thought he only plays Magic.
I think you're right. So we talked about it earlier. Hearthstone's getting a new class, Death Knights. What are your initial thoughts on the Death Knight class?
I think it's an interesting way to go about it. I think it's kind of overwhelming right now as far as like what direction it's going to take. It doesn't seem like it's quite as broken as Demon Hunter did when they introduced it. But there is a lot of power in that class. I could definitely see myself getting drawn to a Blood Death Knight for sure. Like there is a lot of tankiness and a lot of, control options there, where I didn't really feel like that with Demon Hunter when it was Demon Hunter always, like, they tried to make Big Demon Hunter a thing. Like, God bless them. But I mean, other than like OTK Demon Hunter, which was, something else entirely, like it never really felt like it was a control class to me. This feels like a Blood Death Knight feels like something that I could get into for sure. I mean, there's a lot of frost in there. It feels like it's got something for everybody, right? Like if you want to play Freeze Mage, you can play Freeze Mage. If you want to play Token Demon Hunter, you can play Token Demon Hunter and Death Knight. If you want to play Control Priest and Death Knight, you can do that too. And then, kind of the mix and match type of scenario. It's going to be interesting to see how, like, what's actually viable. I haven't really gotten down to that level yet, and that's going to depend a lot on like what else is there. But I think there's a lot of flexibility for one class that go in a bunch of different ways, the way that Demon Hunter really didn't when it came out.
So there was a new game that came out a couple weeks ago called Marvel Snap.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been playing any of it? And if so, how much?
I played it a lot for a week and then I uninstalled it. So it's I realized that, so this is a thing that I've started to do, right? Is I was playing it a lot and I was realizing that I wasn't really having fun. Like, I was playing it and I was trying to rank up, but I wasn't really enjoying it per se. And then I kind of took a step back and said, am I playing this because I like playing it? Or am I playing this because it's what everybody else is playing and I want to be part of the conversation? And I realized that it was the latter, and that's when I uninstalled it. Because, like, it's a great game. Like, it's not to say that it's not a good game. I think it's just not for me. Because, like, the games that I like, I really get into. Like, I will, like, you know, woe betide you if you've not played Tales of Arise, and then that comes to my attention. Like, because I will talk your ear off about that for a while. You know, and like, you know, Hat and I have done like whole episodes when I was doing Off Curve about like Metroid Dread and stuff like that. Like I either love a game, it's either no or it's hell yes for me. You know, and it wasn't really a hell yes. It was kind of like, I'm playing this, but it felt like when I used to be playing Desert Golf, like I was playing it because it was there. But I wasn't really like having a lot of fun with it, and I felt myself like all the negative things that I get when I get invested in a meta, but I wasn't enjoying it when I was doing it. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, let's cut this off before I spend too much more time in it. Like, the time wasn't like that big of a deal. Like, I mean, it's time that I would be I'm not really spending doing other things, but it's also like I just started playing Slay the Spire again instead, and that's been better for me.
If I recall, you did the same kind of thing with Immortal, right?
Immortal was different because Immortal, I just actually Immortal, like, it wouldn't let me into the game, and then I just deleted it because I realized that it was like it was some sort of bug that wouldn't let me log in. But it was like, because I love Diablo, right? And as far as like Diablo mechanics were concerned, like, Immortal was great. Like, they did a really good job making it feel like a Diablo game. It's just like everything around it was bad. And like, I didn't have a problem with like logging in for 15-20 minutes, like doing my dailies and getting out with Immortal, but it was just like, it just kept getting more complicated, and it just felt like I was spending more. It wasn't that I didn't like it, it was just like I knew it wasn't great. And it was just kind of like, I don't like it. Once it stopped letting me in, then I had like a day or two to realize that like I was okay, then I just deleted it. Like, that was another one. Like, it was just but it wasn't quite the same thing, because like Snap, I kind of came to that realization on my own. Diablo Immortal kind of did that for me when they ended up like doing a rollover a season or something and locking me out of the game for a day.
Yeah, so I'm a Diablo fan. I enjoyed Immortal too. And like I was going really, really hard for like the first 2 weeks, and I was holding like top 50 for like the Greater Rift equivalents on my server for like 2 weeks. But it's just not great. And then I have also stopped playing Snap. Like, have a lot of fun, really cool people that play it. The games I had were interesting, but like, just like you, I just wasn't really enjoying it and just playing it so I could go into the different Discord channels and share screenshots and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it, you know, I mean, I get that a lot of people love it, and I think it's great that they do. Like, I think they did a really good job with the game. It's not something that's clicking for me. So, you know, I mean, maybe I've heard that maybe if I kept sticking it out to pull 3, then, you know, then there would be more things that would open up. I heard that with Destiny back in the day too, where, you only have to get to level 50 before the game opens up. It's like, I have things to do. You know, like, I'm not sticking it out to level 50 before the game opens up and I get to do the cool things. I'd like to do the cool things now, please.
Feel free to try to steal the bumper from Storm Rage for the Destiny bumper. I actually, so I enjoy Snap, but I'm not converting to like be my main game. I like that I can play it for 5 minutes here and there if I'm in a line somewhere. I like when I'm about to go to bed. I like to play. I don't want to do a battleground. I don't want to do a full game of Hearthstone. So I like that I can get a quick game of Snap 2 in to just unwind before I settle down. So I've really been enjoying it. I am in Pool 3. I'm starting to get some of these interesting cards. But it's a frustrating game in that some people have become Snap content creators, and it's no fun to watch them because they're playing with all the cards that I can't get now. So I can't do the things they're doing, and I have no opportunity. I can't even pay to get there. It's just you can't, and I don't like that aspect of it. And I like it that it's not forcing you to spend money. I like the way they're doing it. It's also got its positives, but it's also got its negatives because I can spend the money if I want to, and I want to just get the cards so I can do the same things that these other people are doing. But anyway, I am back. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah.
I figured that when you started talking about frenzy builds. It is. I'm getting a little hungry for the main course, Doc. How about yourself?
Broccoli, broccoli, it's time to eat your broccoli.
All right, so today the topic of discussion is about replays. You've heard us talking about replays several times in the last few episodes, and WickedGood is somebody that we've often seen talk about replays in the Coin Consume Discord, and I'd say he's a pretty good expert on the subject. So, Steve, for someone that has no idea what a replay is for Hearthstone, what is it, and how would somebody get started using it?
So usually you have to install a third-party tool, either like Hearthstone Deck Tracker from HS Replay, or Firestone is also another one. Those are the things you'll sometimes see them on streams if you don't know what they are, that just kind of show you like what cards are left in your deck, what your opponent's played. They're useful from that perspective too. But what they do is that they collect all the turn data as the game goes on, and then they upload them to their server, and you can get to them through through a web page, and then it will show you what happened in that game, which is something that the game doesn't do for you itself. Like there are other games, like you can go into like League of Legends and like see the entire replay for like start to finish within the game itself, and Hearthstone doesn't do that, but these third-party tools will do that. So then you can go back and watch the game, knowing what happened, sometimes, seeing whatever cards were shown to you throughout the game if you want to see them. So you're kind of looking at it with hands face up instead of hands face down, and then go back through the game and see like what you did and why did the game turn out the way that it did, knowing what you know now, which is basically what the outcome was.
But why would someone even want to do that?
Well, if you want to get better, then you need to know what you're doing wrong, right? And it's even when you're winning, there are still things that you could be doing wrong that you won't see in the moment, but you'll see when you're looking back at it. It's kind of like, like when you're a kid in math class and you go back and check your work, and then you find this one thing that you did wrong, and now, because you're doing it again, you're looking it over, and then you can correct it and make it better for, before you submit it. You can't change the outcome, but you can kind of see what, how things kind of got to a point. Because like one thing that happens a lot, especially early on when somebody's trying to get better, is that they will look at the card that beat them, the card that somebody played on the turn that they died, like Denathrius, right? And say, well, that card is stupid, and if it wasn't for that card, I would have won. It turns out you made a mistake on like turn 2 or 3 that you'd forgotten about 10 turns later. And if you'd done something differently, then you might have been able to end the game before they even were able to play Denathrius. So this is something that happened. We review them in the Coin Concede Discord occasionally. And there was someone who was posting a Cursed Imp Warlock replay, and they're like, I forget what card it was. Maybe it was Spreading Plague, or it was something like, oh, this card is stupid, and I hate it. And it's like, well, okay, let's take a look. Okay, well, yeah, you lost to this card, but you also played a touch of the Nathrazim after you played your Abyssal Wave. And if you hadn't done that, then you would have been able to play the Dark Vein that you drew the next turn and been able to kill off one of the 2/1s, and you would have had Abyssal Wave in the Dark Vein instead of Touch of the Nathrazim, and that would have given you enough curse damage to be able to end the game before they were able to play the card that they played. So, like, yeah, you lost because you ran out of damage, but had you made this play slightly differently, then you would have had enough damage to get there and you would have won the game. And that's something that it's very hard to see in the moment because you're just kind of going with the decision tree that you're walking down. And you kind of have to, right? Like, there's no way you can't go back. So you kind of need to go with the decisions that you made up to that point. But there are some times that there are decisions that you can make slightly differently, knowing how it ended, and then that's how you improve, is by, reviewing your past results. I mean, sports teams do this all the time, right? Like, sports teams have tape. They have tape review. They're reviewing their play. They're reviewing, their opponents sometimes for scouting, but they're also reviewing, like, tape of their practices or their games to see what they were doing wrong, so to see what they can improve. It's the same thing. If you're playing this game competitively, you need to treat it like a competitor.
But how do you spot these mistakes that you made early? So I understand in this case you just said, hey, I played the Touch of the Nathrazim before that, and maybe that was easy to find because now that I can look back.
It wasn't.
Oh, fair
it
enough.
wasn't. Hat missed it. Hat missed it too. So it was actually kind of tough to find, and that is a problem, right? Because, like, it assumes a level of game knowledge that, like someone like me or like Hat, or that when we've been doing this a long time, we do this in our THL team too. Like, we're on the same THL team, and we will do this on each other's replays, or some other members of the team that will go through turn by turn and say, okay, this is what happened. This is what happened. I think for starters, what you're looking for is, like, turns that you're not sure what to do, right? And, like, I think that's really a great place to get started. It's like, whenever and that happens all the time. Happens to me now, right? Like, I'll be on stream, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm playing cards here, but I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to try this and see what happens, right? It happened a lot when Sidisi was giving me all kinds of weird Hunter decks to play last night. But, like, and it's natural, right? Like, you're not, like, no one, like, unless you're playing this game professionally, you're not going to be an expert in every deck. But there are going to be turns where you're not sure what the play is, and you have two plays, and you're not sure which one of them is right. Screenshot that, right? Screenshot that turn, and then at the end of the game, go back to that turn and look at the decision you made and see how things turned out from there. That's a great place to start, right? Even looking for little things like, did you tap last, right? Did you draw first? Like, the kind of the standard, like, making random effects, happen first so that you have as much information. Like, look for those things. Like, are you getting the fundamentals right?
And if you'd like to talk more about fundamentals, listen to last week's episode where we had Dragon Rider specifically talking about those same things. Yeah. But no, so what you're saying, so decision points are what you're looking for, right? But what about if you look at your replay and you're not necessarily looking at a decision point, but first 3 turns, you look at it and say, well, this is what I played, this is what I played, this is what I played, and that makes sense to you. And you say, well, I don't see a mistake there. How do you find, like, well, I'm playing this wrong versus I made a poor choice or something? Like, is that something that you can get out of these things, or?
Well, I'm going to add one more to you that makes it even more complicated.
Okay.
Was this game winnable at all? Right? Because that happens a lot too. Like, there are times that you'll go into a game and it's like, and that's a lot of times, like in THL, like, I'll post it, especially if I'm playing an aggro deck, which I try not to do, and especially in Conquest, like, holy crap. Like, when I actually care about the result, I'm definitely not trying not to play aggro, but, sometimes I do, and I'll just post it, and, like, could I have done anything here? Right? Because, like, you look at it and it's like, I don't think I could have done anything to make this game turn around. Right? And that's when you need another person to kind of look at it who's got more experience than you in that regard and say, like, well, no, you could have done this, this, and this. Then you could have, and then this could have happened there or whatever, right? But like, there are some games that's like, no, I would have done everything you did, and you just couldn't win that game, right? So like, understand, just being able to sort the games where your decisions, I don't want to say decisions mattered versus didn't matter, because the decisions always matter, but sometimes you have to make sure you're not being results oriented about it, because there are, even like, regardless of the result, there are always things you can learn from a game, and sometimes there are wins that you can learn a lot from because you won despite misplays, and there are losses that maybe you could have done things better, maybe you couldn't have, but it wouldn't have changed the result. So like, that's one of the things I think, but I think the answer is generally getting somebody else to look at it. Most Discords, I mean, certainly the Coin Concede Discord does this, I'm sure yours does it too, will have a channel for posting replays and saying like, what did I do wrong? Now, it helps to have gone through this first, right? And either saying, I don't know what I did, and I think I did everything right, or like, I'm not sure about this play I made here, but I'm not sure what I could have done that was better, right? Because like, whenever you're asking for help, it helps to go in and with a sense of like, I'm not sure, I'm trying to do this, but I don't know what to look for, which is fair. There are times when we will get somebody who's just like angry at the world and posts the replay and like, I couldn't have done anything here. It's like, oh no, yeah, you could have. You super could have. And here's what it is. But getting somebody else to look at it will help a lot, just because you get like a neutral perspective on it, right? Like, you're always going to have emotion wrapped up in these things, at least a little bit, especially if you're tilted. And there are going to be times when reviewing a replay is not going to be productive if you're doing it yourself, and getting somebody else to look at it you'll get to hear what they would have done differently, whether or not it's correct or not. You at least get a different perspective on other things that you could think about when you're in that same situation going forward.
And I think one thing that also people need to remember when asking for help reviewing replays is not to argue in favor of the plays that you made, in a way, because sometimes you'd be like, well, what did I do wrong? And someone will say, well, you probably could have done this, that, and the other. It's like, no, I did this because of this, that, and that. It's like, yeah, but you lost, and someone else is giving you an opinion on what you could have done better. So I think that's something that people need to also kind of get out of, because you're not defending the reason why you lost. You're trying to figure out how to get better. And actually, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think that it is important to think about the reasons that you made the play that you made, right? Because that might be a change in approach, where you're approaching the matchup wrong, right? So I think that introspecting on, I made this play because I was worried about this, and whether or not it's the right or wrong, and is good. I think it's good to understand that, but I think it's also a matter of taking that from a context perspective and not an argumentative perspective, right? Like, if you're and that just basically means trusting that the person who's reviewing it knows better than you do, which it depends on who's doing it, right? Like, if it's, someone who was a good player who's looking at your replays and they're telling you something, like, you should probably take that advice. If it's somebody else who's just like random in the Discord, like, you may have to, I've seen people send other people astray too, when you're reviewing replays, because like, there's no one right answer. So like, sometimes that's healthy to have a discussion about that and add context for why you were making the plays that you were. But I think that needs to be from like a context perspective, not like, if you're not gonna listen to the advice that's being given, why are you asking? Is kind of what you're saying, which is also fair.
Aside from something like that, what are other common mistakes you think people make when they're reviewing their replays?
I think they're probably doing it like, I don't want to say doing it too close, because I think there's like, part of it is that it needs to be fresh in your mind, but also it's like, you've got emotion wrapped up in it when you're doing it right away. One of the things I used to say is like, after every loss, go review the replay. And that can be useful sometimes. I think that stopping at the end and saying like, what could I have done differently, is a valuable thing for a few reasons. One is just like, it cools you down before the next game. And also it kind of gets you in the mindset of not like blaming RNG for your losses, which is really the road that you can go down if you're not looking at these things more objectively.
You said, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you said a little earlier too that you should also review the play. Sometimes review the games that you win. Would you say that's more for finding mistakes that you made, or is that more for reinforcing the good things that you did, or a little of both?
I think it's reinforcing the good things, but also like, there are always things you can improve, right? Like there are always, like, if I go through any of my replays, even from a win, like there are definitely some games where I've misplayed horribly and still pulled it out. And it's there's a time, there's a time element here too, right? Like generally people are going to review the losses because those are the ones that they know that the result didn't turn out. I think it's good to review a number of them and see, like, if there were things that you could have done to make it, like, if you won, was there a way you could have won that game 2 turns faster, right? Like, there are always things that you can optimize. But again, people's time is limited. If you're going to have to sort them, start with the losses, obviously, because those didn't turn out the way that you wanted. I think that, and I think the other thing that people do is don't start from the beginning of the game. Like, there are, like, it's very easy to look to, like, the last couple through 2-3 turns of the game and expect that everything that was important happened there. And the number of times that I see replays that start spiraling out of control on turn 2 out of like a 15 turn game is fairly often, right? Like a lot, like, I mean, especially when I'm looking at control replays, like a lot of the mistakes that I will see is using the wrong removal, right? So there's a turn where, so one of the things that happens a lot in control is you'll have like 2 different ways that you could clear a board. And generally the rule is that what you want to use the one that's going to lose more value, lose value more quickly over the rest of the game, right? So if you have like a board that both a condemn and a whirlpool will clear, you want to use the condemn, because the whirlpool can clear anything. The condemn is gonna struggle with anything but this board that's in front of you, so you should use the condemn. And a lot of times what I'll see is either people using the wrong removal or people using removal when they could have just like chilled for a turn. And then let the opponent build up more of a board to get more value out of the removal. And that's the kind of thing that you're not going to see happen until like several turns later when there's a board that you couldn't remove and you used up that removal already, right? So if you're just looking at the last couple turns, well, of course you couldn't remove it. You didn't have it in your hand. Well, yeah, because you used it 6 turns ago when you shouldn't have, and now it's not there. But that's the piece of the puzzle that's missing, right? So you do have to go back from the beginning and kind of look at everything and question everything, even if it makes sense at the time, but you're looking at it knowing what you know. You know that you lost that board you couldn't clear, right? Why couldn't I clear that board? Oh, because that removal got used here when it shouldn't have. But if you're just starting from, the last couple turns, you're not going to get there.
And you can't go too far back. Once you say, oh, if I would have done this differently, you can kind of picture the next couple turns, but then board states would change and all that. So you can't really play out the rest of the game. But and you say people start too late, and you say start turn 2, turn 3. But I mean, I've seen people review replays as early as today that go all the way back to the mulligan that people were mulligan.
Yep. Every time. Every time I review a replay, I go back to the mulligan. And I mean, there have been some, like Quest Hunter's a really good example where you get to the end of the game and you just haven't been able to get there, right? And then what I'll do with those replays is we just start counting up missed damage, which is something that it's hard to see in the moment, right? But because it adds up over the course of the game. Like a deck like Quest Hunter, you need to have enough damage to go face. So like there have been some replays I've looked, well, okay, you just used this spell to clear this 1/2 that you could have sent face. So that's 3 damage. Okay, now you cleared this minion instead of sending this face. So that's another 4 damage. So and so and so. You lost. They ended the game at 8. You had 12 missed damage over the course of the game. That's where you lost. But it's the kind of thing where it's not even one turn. It's just like a snowball effect of just like all these little things over the course of the game. And that's really hard to see by yourself if you're just starting to learn out, like you're starting to learn. But I think it's good to at least like look at the ones where there are obvious mistakes, and the ones that aren't obvious, then you ask somebody else to look at them for you.
Fair enough. any final thoughts on people how to evaluate your replays to get better?
I think just like, even if you're not great at it, just like going in with a learning mindset, an improvement mindset will help you get there. Like I see a lot of people like stumble on this in goal setting, right? My goal is I want to get to Diamond 5. My goal is I want to get to Legend. Well, no, your goal is to get better at the game, right? Like ultimately, those are milestones. Those aren't goals. And that's when people kind of get tripped up is like, oh, I want to get to Diamond 5 and I can't get there. Well, that's not what you need to do. What you need to do is be looking at a part of the game where you want to get better, right? Because like once you're not focused on the number in the corner and you're focused on the plays that you're making and making the best plays regardless of what the number in the corner says, then the ranks will come, right? I've never gotten to a rank that I've wanted to get at when I've been worried about where I am and where it is. I've always gotten there when I just kind of decided that I wanted to play my best Hearthstone or learn or focus on learning a deck or focus on trying to do this one thing better. And then as I did that, just like my play got better and the ranks came. There's Jared Tendler's mental game of poker is an amazing book to read. That before I was on the show, we had them on Coin Conceit as a guest. This was long before I was the host. But that's still a good episode that's worth going back to. But one of the things that he has a lot of good things in that book, but one of them is like the inchworm concept of improvement, where like if you think about how an inchworm kind of walks, like it flings its head forward and then it kind of drags its butt up behind it, right? So like you're gonna start to learn to do something better, but then you're still gonna make mistakes as long as you're still learning it, and then the process of learning is reinforcing it until the butt comes up to the head, and then you're kind of doing that naturally, and then you can kind of learn the next thing.
And that's
so just like
that's not easy.
It's not. It's hard. It took me a long time, and I mean, it was even after I'd hit Legend a few times, I still was struggling. I ended up going through this. I had a friend of mine who was playing at the time. He was an HCT finalist. Peltier. He's retired from Hearthstone since, and he was very nice to call it a co-op. It was a coaching session, but he was very nice to call it a co-op. And we were going through, this was in the Doom and the Tomb days, like Evolve Shaman. And I was just playing like turn to turn. And then he was watching me play. He's like, well, what's your plan? Like, and it's just like a simple question like that. What are you trying to do over the next couple turns? And I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just like playing for the turn. Right. And even just like something like that, like having somebody watch you and like see what you're doing wrong can kind of just, or even just like looking over replay and kind of identify like something you don't realize you're doing can kind of just unlock things for you. But you need to go into it with an open mind and go into it with like a learning mindset. And as you learn, you will get better, and it will take a while, but the ranks will follow.
I've been in that same spot too. Like right now, I know I'm not in that place where I am frustrated that I am getting up to D3, falling back to D5, and I know I am probably best when I sit there and I say, okay, what's my win condition here? How am I winning this? How are they winning this? How do I stop them from doing this? How do I execute my game plan? And it is so easy to forget that those things are what you're doing. And yeah. Well, I know we've kept you here a little late, and I know I'm getting kind of full, but I think I still have some room for dessert. What do you think, Doc?
WickedGood, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Well, as long as Twitter is still working, you can find me at Twitter at WickedGood on Twitter. Coin Conceit is at coinconceit.com. Off Curve is at offcurve.com, and I stream on Twitch Monday and Friday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern, and that is at twitch.tv/WickedGoodFM. So all of those places. You can also find Coin Concede by looking at whatever app you're using to listen to this, and just go search for Coin Concede, and you will probably find it.
You can find me on Twitter and Twitch at Tito Santana HS. You can also email the pod at breadandbutterhs@gmail.com. How about yourself, Doc?
Yeah, you can find me Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube at Doc McButt. WickedGood, is there anyone you'd like to shout out today?
I guess I'll just shout out Hat and Edel for being good co-hosts, and both of you for having me on. This was fun. I'm glad we got to do this.
Thank you. I'm glad too. Tito, how about yourself?
Well, obviously, Wicked. When I reached out to Wicked, I said, Wicked, we have 3 different topics we want to talk to you about. We want to talk to you about replays. We want to talk to you about prepping for tournaments, which we'll do hopefully when we actually know what tournaments look like in a couple months. And also priests when we start talking about individual classes. So, Wicked, thank you so much for being here. I also want to give a shout out to I'm now part of Hype Horizon. I don't think I've been able to mention that yet.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awesome, dude.
I'm on the feeder team, which is Hype Rising, but it's been very exciting. It's been a very new experience. It's been fun. And one of my new teammates who actually just hit affiliate, the Great Spectacular, is getting married today. So I wanted to give a shout out to him and congratulations and lots of good things. How about yourself, Doc? Anybody you'd like to shout out today?
Yeah, WickedGood, for being on the show. Like I said earlier, you're kind of to me at least, one of the pillars of the community as like a whole. And
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say.
Of course, like, gotta give credit where credit's due. It's just so cool to see someone who I hold in such like high esteem to be willing to come to our little rinky-dink show and have fun with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's the end of the show, Doc. I guess we're toast.
Slide two brothers meet one another when they slide up to the mic. It's bread and butter with one another. Let's start up that recording light.